Hi, everyone. We're live. I'm live from my bedroom floor because my home office also doubles as a play area. So, priorities. Ramadan Mubarak and a blessed Friday to all of our guests and viewers who are observing this holy month. Thank you to everyone who's joining us this afternoon for CCF's second webinar. My name is Leena Al-Arian. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, whose our mission is to defend civil liberties and freedoms, promote a fair US criminal justice system, and advocate for the rights of political prisoners targeted in the war on terror. In case you missed it, our first webinar, which aired last week at the same time, was on the spread of the coronavirus in US federal prisons. The video for that can be found in the video section of our Facebook page, as well as our Civil Freedoms YouTube channel. So please check those out if you haven't seen them already. Today, we're planning to carry the conversation forward to focus on the case of the Holy Land Five and the 5 political prisoners who are now over the age of 60 years old and are among the 30 prisoners we've identified who are vulnerable to the coronavirus as it spreads in prisons. We're so lucky and honored to have 5 family members of all 5 prisoners who I believe are gathered today for the first time, all 5 of them. So this is really a privilege to be able to converse with them about this topic and hearing from them directly. In response to the COVID-19 outbreak, the Coalition for Civil Freedoms initiated the Coronavirus Prisoner Release Project. And what that means is our legal director, who will be talking more about this project later on, has been filing compassionate release motions for 30 vulnerable prisoners that we've identified. In looking at that list just earlier this week, it really, it just jumped at me and was a little shocking that 5 of them were these Holy Land Five who are now over the age of 60. It's heartbreaking to think that this is one of the earliest cases in the war on terror, one of the most horrifying miscarriages of justice that we've seen. These are our modern day political prisoners, and it just breaks my heart to see that, they're aging in prison, their children have grown up without them, and that's why I felt it was important to be able to hear from their now grown children, their sons and daughters. I'm joined today by CCF Deputy Executive Director, Dr. Mel Underbakke, who will join me in conversation with Zaira Abdulqader, Zaira Abu Bakr, Asma Elashi, Tasnim Al-Mezain, and Mohamad Odeh. Afterwards, our legal director, Kathy Manley, will provide an update on our coronavirus prisoner release project. And we'll hear then from Steve Downs, the chairman of our board, who has co-authored a bill with the HLF in mind in hopes of bringing justice to them, because we know that this is a political case, that it will require a political solution. So right now I want to focus on hearing just stories from the family members. Many of us are already familiar with the case, but Steve will talk about some of the particulars of the case, where we are in terms of any sort of legal or political recourse, and talk about the bill that he's been lobbying for this last year. We'll end with a Q&A session. So please, as we're talking and conversing, please feel free to submit your questions through the chat on Zoom or on Facebook Live, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions. We're gonna do a hard stop at 4:00 p.m. Before I, take up more air in the Zoom, I will end here. So I just want to begin by having all 5 sons and daughters kind of tell us about ourselves. As a daughter of a former political prisoner myself, I, like to remind people that we are more than our struggles. So please tell us about who you are, what you do, where you are in your lives, and if Sada could start us off. Hang on, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, yeah, so my name is Mufid Abdulqader. I'm a professional educator. I'm a certified reading specialist. I teach 4th grade. I work with kids from, kindergarten to 6th grade, help them improve their reading and English language arts, comprehension, etc. And, it kind of, I don't want to say it becomes who you are, but, like when my dad was first arrested, I was 11 and I'm 28 now. So it's kind of like something you've lived with almost your whole life. And kind of, you know nothing else. You can't even remember anything else. But, I think the struggle has definitely shaped us as families and gave us, the ambition to always want to do what's right in life. And like you said, just to be the daughter of a political prisoner makes you hyper aware of what is, what should we be striving for as a country in terms of giving justice and equality to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Asma, you're,
That's not your.
I'm going to be calling on you guys, so.
Okay, no problem. My name is Asma Elashi, daughter of Ghassan Elashi. Currently, he's a co-founder and serving 65 years. I am speech therapist. I work also with pediatrics, children. Became a mother 2 years ago, and I'm also on the way to having a baby soon. And that's it.
Thank you. Zaira and Nida, unmute yourselves. Like, hang on, let me. All right. Yep, now we can.
Yep, no.
We are daughters of Shukri. I am a counselor. I'm working at a school right now. Also was a teacher for a while. And it's kind of like Sada said, it's kind of taken up this whole situation, unfortunately, has become who we are. It's defined us and never change it for the world. I'm proud to be one of the daughters of the Holy Land Five. And I will continue to be proud because I know that at the end of the day, they did nothing. And we just are so grateful for you guys to have us here and give us a platform to spread awareness, because that's really all we want. Is we want the HLF5 not to be forgotten. I mean, it's been 12 years and it was one of the first, it was like the biggest Muslim American charity. And they didn't only work for Palestine, they did worldwide things. They helped within the nation, they helped all around the world. And we pray that this is a way for you, whoever's watching, to, if anything you say inspires you, to please help spread awareness about the HLF5 and not to forget them.
I think I read several times that it's also the largest charity, or it was at some point, not just Muslim American, but the largest charity. They were one of the first responders following the Oklahoma City bombings. Many of the leaders, I think, even donated blood themselves, and they were there on the front line. So as we're now looking at this coronavirus pandemic and, appreciating these frontline workers, I also want to take the time to appreciate the work that they've done in the face of other crises, human rights crises, and pandemics that are caused by humans, man-made crises. Tasnim, you're next.
Hi everyone, my name is Tasnim El-Mezain. I'm a proud daughter of Mohammad El-Mezain. I currently live on the West Coast, alhamdulillah, and I'm a registered dietitian, so I work in a hospital. My floor is actually all COVID patients too, so I'm experiencing this firsthand as well. And kind of bouncing off what everyone else was saying is that our dads have always encouraged us to do good, and my dad's always saying, like, no matter what happens, give back into your community, because, as we know, this is our payment on earth. And so besides being a dietitian, I actually continued, and I'm getting my master's in kinesiology with an emphasis in integrative wellness. And so I'm really hoping to continue to help people and help myself as well in terms of just healthier in society. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. Mohamad, tell us about yourself.
Salam everyone, I'm Mohamad Odeh, son of Abdulrahman Odeh. My father's currently serving 15 years, which is one of the lighter sentences. But yeah, I'm basically here to do my part and spread awareness for the case. It's been 12 years, as Zaira said, and it's one of the biggest injustices we've seen in the U.S. Till today. And it does really become part of your life, being the son of a political prisoner. But it does kind of shape us and gives us kind of our good values that we were raised with. And basically, we're just here to, spread more awareness and try to keep the Palestinian case alive, especially on today, the anniversary of the Nakba. It's a big day. And I'm just glad to be a part of this and that everyone's here right now. And I just want to thank the Coalition for Civil Justice for everything you guys do. Seriously, appreciate it.
We appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much. I just want to, get into it about what their conditions are like. Some of you who joined us early maybe got to hear the voice of Shukri Abubakar, who's serving a horrific 65-year sentence. He was able to call his daughters from prison. Can you tell us which facility he's currently being held at, what the conditions there are like, and what you've heard from him? And before that, I just want to say that there are now over 2,000 positive cases of coronavirus that the BOP is reporting. I think over 200 staff members. Of course, as Kathy will tell you, these numbers are completely inaccurate. They're intentionally reduced. The cases are much more, the testing is limited. So if Zaira, you could just tell us about what your dad just shared with you.
Yeah, for sure. So he's actually in Beaumont. He's in a maximum facility. So everyone there is actually at a higher sentencing, but nobody has what he has, 65 years. So that's for sure. It's actually very, very violent prison. It's actually, I think, on the top 5 in the nation.
It was like top 10 or something.
Yeah, and it's literally always fights. There's a lot of gangs in there. There's always something going on. So he's actually always in lockdown. Even before this whole COVID thing happened, we were kind of used to him being on lockdown all the time, not hearing from him. There were a couple of incidents where there were really dangerous fights that broke out, and he wasn't involved. It's just that where it happens, it got really bad. People are stabbing each other. And then when the guards came to spray some type of mace, it came into his lungs. He fell unconscious. So it's always that fear of the unknown. Like, you try not to think about it, but deep down inside, you're like, he's in a maximum security facility, and that he's going through so much, and he doesn't even tell us maybe a glimpse of what really goes on. We have to find out other ways. With the COVID, it has been stressful just because he is older, and we are more at a risk of catching the virus. And so just last week, something major happened with him, and he called us, and he's with everything that's happened in our lives, in our family, personally, with my sister passing away yesterday was the 7th year anniversary. I don't know if you call it an anniversary of her passing, but with all that, with his dad passing, I had never heard that type of, I can't even express the emotion that he was having last week when he called. It was almost like a true fear. They all of a sudden told them hey, we're moving you guys out. So mind you, even before we went on lockdown, the prison was already on lockdown, right? So they were all quarantining. They were not even allowed to, whatever, if you're with a cellie, that's the only person that you can really interact with. And they would give them in the whole day 1 hour. Mind you, this is 1,000 inmates. They would give them an hour to either go, take a shower or make a phone call. And to make a phone call for your family actually takes an hour to stand in line. So it's kind of you pick your priority for the day. And he called me last week. He's like, don't say anything, just listen to what I have to say. They're moving us. They're going to separate us and just disperse us around other units in the prison where there has been COVID. And he was just like, I'm not afraid for myself. I don't want you guys to stress. He's always, and I know all the other amlas have the same, they've always been the ones that keep us going. Instead of us keeping them going, they're the ones that always give us that hope and that strength. And so he was for once actually worried. He was really worried. And he was like, I don't know what's happening. They're just going to move us. And if you don't hear from me, then, and then at the same time, we know with the compassionate release, and he was like, I literally qualify, but they're telling me I don't qualify. And one of the reasons why he doesn't qualify is because of his ludicrous sentencing of 65 years. So for sure, COVID has affected the prisoners. You can see it all over the news. It is spreading. And then with what happened last week, that was the scare. He's okay. I mean, it was just kind of that moment where my dad kind of like wanted to warn us, but he's adjusting in the new unit. But I am like, yeah, I'm worried. Like, what if he catches it from someone else? Because they were all quarantined, and then they kind of mixed them all up again. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, he says, I'm
the guards, the guards are in and out, they're not quarantined, they're out in society and they're bringing it in with them. And you have them packed like sardines and they have no way to self-isolate. And to just explain to our viewers why your dad wouldn't qualify for the early release or under home confinement is because one of the requirements is to have served 50% of your sentence. So when you're sentenced to 65 years, and like many of our inmates who are sentenced, to horrifically, outrageously long sentences, it's because of the terrorism enhancement that it's not possible to meet that requirement. Tasnim, I know your father in Oakdale, Louisiana, it's one of the worst hit facilities. Have you been able to speak with him?
Yeah, thank God he's been able to call us. We're a really big family, so he'll take turns calling each of us. We actually don't get the opportunity to talk to him for like a full 15 minutes because he has to save between all 8 of his kids and his own family back home as well, and my mom being able to share all of those minutes. So I basically get 2 minutes to talk to him once a week, if he has those minutes. And so he also gets about an hour a day to go out, give and take if they're not on lockdown. Well, they are on lockdown like the 23 hours, but if it's the full 24 hours. But this is affecting my dad even more. He's already at high risk. He has multiple conditions, diabetes, heart disease. And so this is even more, it's actually very concerning. Anytime we see our dads, and I know we reflect about this, when we're about to leave, it's like this very heavy heart feeling of, is this the last time I'm gonna see him? And I was able to see some of these ladies back late last year, and it brought back a lot of memories of everything. And I just really wanted to see my dad. So luckily my husband and I were able to see him at the end of last year. And so that feeling of like, am I going to see him again? And when this whole COVID thing started and I started to see these people in the hospital and hearing about friends that have family members that have passed away, it's really taxing to hear, because it's like, I can't physically go and take care of my dad. I don't know if he's going to call me again. I don't know if he's going to call my mom again. And witnessing patients of my own passing away, it's very challenging, because it's like, this was the last time I saw him, and is this the last time I'm going to see him in this life? So it's very emotional for my family and I. And I'm sure it is for all HL5. In that he's very high risk. He uses a cane to walk around. He had like a skin rash one time, and it took over a year to finally figure out what's going on. They don't really take care of their health conditions as much as they should. They're kind of on that low priority end. And so just knowing that, in addition to everything that's happening in the prison system right now, and the sanitation part of it and all of that, it's really heartbreaking, because you can't do anything but pray that God's going to protect them, because they shouldn't be in prison for something like this. And especially at these times, to even hear that Nida and Zaira's dad gets declined, it's like, are you serious? For what they did, he's not considered one of these. So it's very heartbreaking and very difficult for us, and we're trying to pray and stay optimistic and have hope that God's going to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in? I wanted to say that my dad actually did meet their criteria, because he was sentenced to 20 years and he's already done 12, and he met all their criterion and they still said no. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter if you meet the criterion or not. The warden literally just told my dad, look, it doesn't really matter what you send, we're not going to approve. So it's kind of like the injustice that we dealt with in the courtroom. It followed us throughout this whole our ordeal. All these 12 years, we've dealt with this. They were in Seagoville for a while. They moved them all to CMUs for absolutely no reason. We had no contact visits. for 5 years for no reason. They got one phone call a week for 15 minutes. And like she said, it wasn't even whenever they wanted. There was a specific time. If you missed it, you missed it. You know, so it's been a consistent issue. It's not like once they were given that sentence that injustice ended, they have been behind every single decision this whole time to try to, even when they're in jail, make it as horrible as possible. Because like only recently they got, like, literally my son was probably 2 when my dad first got to see him, because no contact visits for 5 years, not even get to touch his hand, between plexiglass, using a phone call for no reason, you know, especially when they're not criminal charges, like they're not violent charges. So I mean, it didn't really matter if you met the criteria or you didn't, because my dad did meet the criteria. Mm-hmm. And they just said it in plain language. They told him, look, it doesn't really matter what you apply for, because we're not going to approve it. Mm-hmm. That's literally what they said. So it's kind of like the law is something, and then the application of the law, it obviously doesn't apply to everyone.
Of course, yeah. Asma, were you able to take your daughter to visit your dad at any point?
Yeah, thankfully, actually, we visited him early March. I think this before they started lockdowns and implementing like restrictions in the US, like before. But it was still pretty known, like, you know, everybody was talking about it from China and everything. But we were able to see him, which I was really grateful for. And it was contact. He's currently in Kentucky, middle of nowhere kind of prison, and he's actually in his own, he's in a room with no cellmate, which he prefers, and it's good that way, but it does get pretty, I think, lonely, especially during this month of Ramadan, which no one has mentioned that yet, but it was a time for when they all would get together, all of the Muslim inmates, and kind of break fast together and communion. And now he's obviously, because of the COVID and the quarantine, which is for their safety, but it's, you know, they're having iftar sent to them, you know, through a little hole or window or whatever. And so he breaks fast alone and all of that. And just like everyone mentioned, he's been on lockdown. He can only get out like 3 times a week for 1 hour each day. And so he makes phone calls. And because I have a big family as well, by the time it circulates to me, it's like once a month he calls me. So not very frequent, but it is nice to hear his voice every time he calls and catch up and everything. But he seems like his spirits are always high, and that always motivates me and keeps me going. But you can tell it's particularly difficult at this time because it's very unpredictable. Like Zaira said, them being switched to units or them being moved around, and then the guards not having to be quarantined. I mean, you just never know what could be spread in prison. And everyone knows, they always tell us like that visiting the inmates is a privilege and it's not a right. And so it's like they kind of treat them like they're second-class citizens, right? So it's kind of like they're just collateral damage if, you know, they get tested positive or like they die or something. So that is a very, I think, unpredictable feeling. But all in all, I was, grateful to have visited him in the beginning of March with my daughter, and before this whole craziness, you know, took on full force.
Mohamad, how's your dad doing? I see that his facility is also hard hit with the coronavirus. Have you been able to talk to him recently?
Yeah, he's in Milan, Michigan right now. They've had, I believe he said 57 cases of COVID-19 and about 3 deaths. But even before COVID, he's needed like a simple hernia surgery, and they keep denying him for it over and over, to the point where they literally, to his face, just told him, you can sue us. You're not basically getting this surgery. So I'm not expecting really much compassion from them now. It's same thing basically with the lockdown. I only get like 30 minutes a day, and you got to decide whether, you want to go shower, get your things together, or make a couple phone calls. So we hear from him maybe twice, 3 times a week, which we're blessed to get that. Because earlier it was harder when he first was incarcerated. We would hear from him maybe like 2 times a month or something like that. So like half the time. But now, I mean, we're gonna try for this compassionate release. I'm not gonna get my hopes up on it, but I mean, he's over 60 years old. He has a couple medical conditions that should qualify him to, you know, come home. And he served over 50% of his time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm keeping my hopes up in God, you know, but that's all we can do right now.
How old were you when your dad was arrested?
My dad was arrested. I was probably 13, 12 years old, something like that. I was actually overseas at the time when they first got arrested, so we had to hear of it over the phone, and it was just a bunch of drama, and we really didn't know what was going on. All we got was a phone call that my cousin called us, and he's like, hey, my uncle just got arrested, and we don't even know why. The FBI just picked him up. And it was just scary, you know, not knowing what the heck is going on, and you're all the way over in Jordan. He's in America going through the worst time of his life. You can't even be there to support him.
Have you been able to visit him lately?
I actually got to visit him earlier this year. He's like a 5-hour drive from where I live in Wisconsin. So thankfully I was able to see him before the shutdown happened. So.
You know, I just, as sons and daughters, I really just wanted everyone to kind of go around and talk a little bit about how this case has affected your life. I mean, your lives, you were all very young. I mean, you were kids and, you know, growing up, you know, I remember feeling that, you know, my father wasn't the only one who was incarcerated. Like, we were all in prison, in our own prison with him. And, you know, this is something that families of prisoners often say, that it isn't just their loved one who's in prison. We're in our own kinds of prison, and it's something that never leaves you. And it's almost worse than death in a way, because there's no closure. And the person is just suffering, and, you know, you're worrying about them day and night. And, you know, if you can just maybe start us off, Tasnim, to talk of, or sorry, we'll start with Zaira this time, what that's been like for you and how your father's case has affected your life.
So when my dad was first arrested, I was 11. And I think just the whole ordeal of how they preferred to make a show of it. And, you know, they had to bring like 15 FBI officers into the house and bang on the door, you know, just being that young and not really understanding what was going on, because you're kind of like, you know, I was really young. My parents shielded me. I don't even think they knew what was going on. I mean, considering my dad, he didn't even work at the Holy Land Foundation. He was one of many volunteers, you know. He was a civil engineer, and he worked for the city of Dallas. Just having to see that, you kind of, just the trauma of that day, you just don't really ever forget it. You kind of grow up with the lack of, I don't want to say stability, because I know all of our moms did the best that they could, you know, but just not knowing, like, especially during the trial, because we had to go through it twice. I'd go to school, and there would always be that wonder, like, well, maybe I'll go home and he won't be there again, you know, and that is kind of what happened, you know, being pulled out of a chemistry test in the 11th grade, telling him, okay, well, you know, the jurors made a decision, and rushing to downtown Dallas to kind of, you know, wait for what happens. It's you know, it was just really hard to go through the lack of, like, you want, obviously not want, but it's a necessity of life to have a father there in your life, and then to consistently have a fear that he's going to be gone. And then when they actually do go, not being able to see him, you know, moving him to a prison really far away, not sure when you can go see, you know, just taking the time out, finances, everything. So it just makes, I think, it makes you kind of grow up a little bit faster than you would have otherwise. But I mean, complaints aside, I think it made us stronger. I think it made us appreciate fathers more. Like I always tell my husband, if anyone knows what the value of a father is, it's me. You know, when you don't have one consistently in your life as much as, you know, a father would be if they were at home, you know how much difference it makes. So, I mean, definitely, I think it was hard, but it definitely did not stop us. We all, you know, went to college. We all did the best that we could, try to make a difference in our community, improve the lives of everyone around us. So, you know, there's nothing more I guess we can do.
Mhm. It's amazing. I mean, yeah, I mean, Miko Peled, who authored the book Injustice, The Story of the Holy Land 5, he's watching. He just texted me and he said, it's amazing how calm you guys are. And, you know, I don't want to misquote him, but he said, how are they not so angry, you know, and you guys are all so sweet and calm and able to talk about this and just so, you know, stoic. And I don't know, I said it must be that Palestinian resilience, but I'll actually use this opportunity to announce the webinar we have next week, which we have Miko Peled, my dad, and it'll be moderated by special guest Nora Barrows-Friedman. It's the topic is on Israel's interference in the US criminal justice system, and we'll talk more about the cases of the HLF. My father will talk about his case and other cases where, unfortunately, you know, well, you'll hear about it more, but what the political dimensions of these cases are more specifically. This week we're hearing from the families, next week we'll hear about the politics of these cases. He has a great book. He talks about this case and really, you know, picks it apart. So I encourage people to get that case, that book, and read up on it before next week's webinar. Tasnim, if you can talk about a little bit how it's affected your life as well.
This is my whole life, and I think anything that I remember of my dad before is I was also 12 at the time when this first started, and anything that I remember of my dad is good things. I know we're all humans, but just his actions, the things he would do, like we would be at the mosque shop that's really small, and there's a kid that wants candy, and he would like go buy them candy, or he would be always saying positive things. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and he's praying. He's constantly encouraging people to give, even if it's a little. Always positive, like goodness that's pure. And so when this all happened, it really didn't make sense to me, and I didn't really think there were bad people in this world, and so like growing up, I still don't have proper closure about what happened, and I think that just every day, like in school or whatever, a lot of people didn't know about my dad's case, and the shift in friends that happened. Either people got really close to me or people moved away, and then just trying to push forward. It's really amazing how much how motivational the HLF5 were towards us, especially like first-handedly, like with my dad, and continuing to encourage us, like, keep your head up high, keep going to school, keep doing good things, share what you're learning. My dad would always put me in check with things like, are you reading the Quran? Are you volunteering in your community? Are you doing this? And he's physically in prison, but his mind and his spirit is not. And I know all HLF5 are like that, where even though they're not physically able to be right in front of me, they're still encouraging us to do good. And that's basically what I've been trying to do, not because I want to make my dad proud per se, but because that's what we're supposed to do as humans. And that's what they were doing as humans as well, was bringing good to this world where people were suffering, including children. And so that's been my life, volunteering in the community, volunteering with youth groups, being like a dietitian, trying to go into helping people with their well-being. But there are days where I just cry, like, and I miss him. And I know Miko mentioned, like, how are we not angry? Anger never brought me anything. It brought me more bad emotions, but I feel like being hopeful in God that justice will prevail soon, and being more you know, just reflecting, but also like knowing that we're humans, and there's going to be days where like we cry and we miss our dad. It's really hard not to like burst into tears when we see him or when we talk to him, and we know that they're doing that too. They're trying to stay strong for us too, but it's been my entire life, everything that I've ever done. What's really difficult is like in middle school, I would remember like any small ward ceremony, like my dad would be there in a heartbeat. And so any ceremony that I've ever had after was very difficult, like in high school, graduating college, getting into a really competitive program for dietetics, like graduating my undergrad, getting married. All of these things were very difficult moments in my life not to have my dad physically present. Even in high school, like I remember some of my friends would be like, I hate my dad, he took my phone away from me because I stayed up using it all night. And in my mind, I'm like, I wish my dad could take my phone away from me, you know, like I don't have that. And so that was very difficult growing up, but it's also the flip side. It made us stronger, like Sada mentioned. Like everything that I think of in terms of like the strength that I have, I think of, okay, if my dad could be doing this, then I could be doing this too. In prison, he's learning like other languages. At one point he was trying, you know, he's learning Spanish. Sometimes he talks to me in Spanish. He was trying to learn like Chinese at one point. He's just like constantly like trying to make the most of it and help people learn how to like read Arabic and helping people with whatever it may be. And so it's like, if he is using the very limited resources that he has where he is, I have no excuse to contribute back into the community that I am in. So everything, it had everything, and it still has everything, and it still will have everything to do with my life and my family's life.
Mm-hmm. You know, this actually, I guess, leads to my next question. We have some young mothers in our, you know, among you guys, and your kids obviously were all born after their grandfathers were unjustly incarcerated. And I'll have Asma kind of tell me how, you know, how old were you when your dad was arrested when the case began? Well, no, I guess it began much sooner, but when he was arrested in 2007.
Yeah, I think
how,
everybody.
what is it?
Oh, sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask you, how has it affected you, and how have you been able to, maybe, I mean, Zuhaira's kid is a little bit older, but, you know, being able to teach your children about, you know, your fathers and who they are, and, you know, why isn't our grandpa here? You know, I've had to myself, given my dad after he was deported, you know, why can't Sido come here? You know, why do we have to go there? And with you guys, of course, it's a whole other dimension. So how do you explain that to your children? But first, tell us how it's affected you.
Yeah, well, it's kind of speaking like, you know, off of everybody else. It's the same where sometimes you feel helpless and you're not doing enough, or you want to help your father, but always knowing that, like, just going on with life. And I was pretty young when this happened, like even before high school. So just continuing to stay positive and resilient and to go through life and finish college and you know, work on your education, like that is doing my part, right? And in a way, it's not like you get over it, but you don't let it take over you. And so that's always, I think, having a lot of dreams lately, which is pretty positive, like that he's around us and that he's out. I have a lot of those dreams lately, and so have my siblings, and so we always take that as good signs. And then just like Tasnim mentioned, like he was always involved in every step of our life, even though he's not physically present. Whether it was through email or phone call, he would always, you know, we were always step by step with him. Whether I was, you know, trying to get into a program, a master's program, or, you know, right before I was getting married, just preparations, just everything like that. He would always offer advice, but without being overbearing. So he'd let me make the decision, but he would always, you know, offer his wisdom, which I appreciated. Now, in terms of having a kid, which to me, I felt like even getting married and him not being present wasn't a big deal. I was like, what makes me, you know, more sad is the fact that I'm going to have the child and the child's not going to get to know, you know, her grandfather. So that was actually more heartbreaking for me. But the first time I visited him with my daughter, she was too young to understand. She was under a year. And then this time when I took her, she was 2 years, and I was so shocked by how how much they can understand being so young. She developed a really good relationship with him right away, very quickly, sat on his lap, even though they had, last time we went, they had a different guard there that was by the book, so he didn't even let my dad touch her, or she couldn't sit on his lap or anything the whole 4 hours of our visitation, or 5 hours. So she just had to be on my lap. And so that was pretty difficult, because how do you stop like a 2-year-old from trying to, just come and bond with her grandfather? So that was difficult. But the first time I visited him, they allowed her to sit on his lap and stuff. So anyways, at the end of the visitation, when we were about to say goodbye, they separate the inmates and they separate the visitors. And so they have to go like in the corner, across from us. And she kept on telling me that in Arabic, she was saying that I want him to come with us in the car. And she just kept on, like, she had a very stressful face. And she was like almost crying, and she was like, let him come with us in the car. Why isn't he coming? She was very confused, like why we were being separated, why he couldn't come. And then of course, as kids, they just forget, but it was a sad moment, and I couldn't explain it to her because she's too young. But maybe Zuhaira can talk off of that, just because her kid is a little bit older.
I'm gonna ask, actually, so Sada has to go at in 20 minutes. She's teaching a class, actually. So I'll pose the question to Sada, how she explains it to her kids, and then we'll ask Zuhaira. We'll get to her.
My son, when he was first born, my dad was not allowed. We were not allowed to have contact visits, so he wasn't allowed to hold him. This was his first grandchild. So he actually had to wait until my son was almost 2 to actually get to sit with him and see him and be able to talk to him. And Asma said, when my son was younger, he didn't really understand. He would just call him, oh, that's a big Sido, because my dad's kind of big. And recently, because my dad is in Seagoville, which is 30 minutes, he's been away from our house, so he's a lot closer now, so we're able to visit him more often. Just the whole process of going there, you have to wait for hours outside the prison to be able to go inside. So whenever my son knows, okay, we're gonna go visit Sida, he's like, oh my God, we're gonna wait so long, just the process of it is difficult. And then Asma said, just having to be separated, he would tell my dad on the phone, just the other day, he told him, Sido, I want you to come to our house, come to our house. So I haven't told him he's in prison, because he's at the age where they think only bad people go to prison, and I don't want him to ever think that his grandfather did anything wrong, because he hasn't. So at this point, he just lives, that's somewhere he lives, because I think to tell him anything else, he would understand it in a different way. So it's kind of treading very soft ground. You don't really know what to say. I know Zuhaira's son is older, and he does understand now that he's in a prison. But my son is still at that age where we're just telling him, well, he can't come. Inshallah, one day he'll be able to come.
Zuhaira, how have you been able to explain it? And has your son read any of your dad's poems or essays, or all the beautiful things that he writes from prison?
Yeah, so and Sada knows my struggle with Zakaria. He's 7 now, and so from the get-go, at first it was, oh, we're just visiting Sido. That's all it was. And then it turned into, this is where Sido works. Then it turned into, he lives where he works. I would say maybe this year is kind of when we had to, he, like Sada said, right, prison is for bad people. So we had to, that dreadful day came finally. I kept saying, how am I ever going to explain this to him? And then I think about it, because you asked earlier how this has affected us. My sister Shuruk was actually 7 years old in 2nd grade the day the verdict was found guilty, and the day they took our dads to prison. So it's a very, I'm looking at him, Shuruk was that age, right? And I remember the day that I had to tell Shuruk what happened. We came back we were I mean, it was what, 2-3 years of trials, right? First trial, second trial, but that day we came home without Baba. So just remembering that, and when I'm listening to like Sara and Mohamad and Tasnim and Asma, it's so weird. Like I'm almost like I feel like when I'm listening to stories, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going through the same thing. I don't know if it's not that I'm immune or numb to it, not at all, no, but it's just like when you hear someone else talking about it, it just like, it's like right here, it just kind of gets to you. And I literally grew up in the HLF. Like that was our second home. We grew up there every single day after school. My dad lived there. So like we grew up watching these videos. My dad would, like, even if we fought, I remember Sanab al-Yarhamha, like when we fought over something in our room, and he dragged us to the office and showed us a video of these, a family, I think of 10 or 11 in a refugee camp that were literally in one little room, right? And so, he did the whole like, look what you have compared to this, and that. And so I think the first part of our grief as a family was the HLF closing down before even our dad's going to prison. So it was like, I literally, my dream was to follow in his footsteps and be the next CEO or whatever it may be. So that was, I think, the first part of our grief. And you go through all the steps, right? Denial, anger, whatever. And then when the trials happened, mistrial, okay, hope, and then found guilty. That was a whole other thing that we went through. And through this process, by the way, we as families, we grew closer. The Mezains, you guys were here for a while too during the trials. Mohamad, I mean, I remember the day of the verdict, he had a backpack on. He had come from school. I will never forget that. And throughout all of this, like we were seeing injustice. I was being pulled over for no reason. My dad was being pulled over for no reason. And growing up watching these videos of like the Israelis coming into the houses, I always thought that only happened in Palestine or in these countries, that never thought this would happen. But when it happened on July 24th, when they came and raided our homes, it was literally like Israeli troops coming into those homes of those kids. It was so traumatizing. I was older, but knowing that my sisters went through that, my little sisters, and it was like maybe 15 people in the house, agents, cops, it was so traumatizing. I can't imagine what Shuruk was like, maybe 3, Nida was 7. It was so traumatizing. And all these things are carrying with us, right? As we go through the trials, as we like, when they said guilty, like, I think my heart dropped. I don't think anyone expected the word guilty to come out. And so it's kind of like, as a counselor, how these things affect you psychologically, and trauma is real, and post-traumatic stress is real. And so, Miko's always giving us more credit. We are only humans for sure. And like every phase of your life, knowing that you have to go through these tough times and good times while your dad is sentenced for 65 years is mind-boggling. And yeah, we cry, we laugh. And again, they're the ones that kind of keep us strong. And then, we had the visitations. Every time we'd visit, every single time we'd visit, there's an issue. There's always an issue. So they pick on my dad specifically, and they always tell him, Baker, they call him Baker. You know what you're in here for. We know you didn't do anything, but it's a terrorism case. So it came to a point where even Zakaria, there would be kids, and they would always like say, oh, he's doing this, oh, he's doing that, or oh, he needs to take up a spot. Like, it was always something so ludicrous. Or one time, like, you all need to take your scarves off. We have to see what's under. Like, every single time, even within a visit, sometimes we go for 2 days in a row. The first day, it would be a different rule. The second day, it's like, oh, you have to take your cardigans off. I can't, my religion, I'm not, whatever. So they were like, too bad, so sad, these are the rules. So literally every visit is a struggle. Mind you, not, putting aside the smell of the prison, the sound of the keys and the doors locking behind you, it's very surreal and eerie at the same time. When we go and visit, I don't know if anyone else can relate, it's freezing cold. My dad is not allowed to wear anything under. They do it, they don't want the visitations. They don't want to take that time to sit here and have you watch you while you visit your loved one, right? And so of course, like Sada said, we went through CMUs where it was behind the glass, or we would have to, I remember Sanabil had the oxygen, we'd go in through the airplane, and then from the airplane, we get to Indianapolis, we drive a few hours just to get to the CMUs. And even when we get to CMUs, this is like, behind the screen and by the phone. If the phone wasn't working, your whole visitation is canceled. So you go back. Emotionally, spiritually, whatever. It's very draining. So then as going back to Zakaria, as he started growing up, he started knowing, and he's 7. So he's like, so if Sido's in a prison, he didn't do anything bad. I actually had to tell him right now to go watch TV. He was getting very teary-eyed. Like I said, Sada knows my struggle with him. He literally cries. He talks about him. He's like, I want him here. It's not fair. He did nothing wrong, Mama. I don't understand why he's in prison. And then he's always saying, okay, is he gonna come home? And it came to an age where, like Asma was saying, I would say like 4-ish, when Zakaria, he'd be like, oh, Cedar, I will not forget the day he held his hand and was like, are you gonna come with us? And it broke my dad's heart. And when you're in that visitation, it becomes like, you know, when I go back to saying that, like, you're numb to it, there are times where we look at each other like, wait, are we literally in a visitation in a maximum security prison with actual criminals around my dad? Like, that my dad hates the fact that we even go in there. He's like, I've put you in a situation where you're surrounded by actual criminals. And you know, that's a whole other thing. And the visitation has become kind of like, he feels like he's burdening us, right? They always care more about us than we care about ourselves. But I am struggling. I'm not gonna lie. I'm struggling right now with my son because it's such a confusing situation. I did tell him he didn't do anything wrong. He understands that, but he just doesn't understand why is he in prison. And so I have to say, you know, they made a mistake. And sometimes when you are a minority, like, I have to have the whole conversation with him. But it's a 24/7 thing. And, you know, Nida had a baby. And the other day he was telling him that I feel so sad for you, Adam, because I don't want you not to meet Sido Shukri, right? So,
and he was telling my husband, he was like, you know, I don't want Adam, he's 6 weeks old now, by the way. I don't want Adam to grow up knowing about Sido Shukri. And my husband's like, why? He's like, because I don't want him to grow up knowing that Sido Shukri is in jail. He's like, I don't know. And he was literally like about to tear up. He's like, I don't know. I can't. It's too sad, man. And this is a little 7-year-old saying that about his 6-week-old cousin. He doesn't want him to grow up knowing about his grandpa being in prison. And at that moment, like, we're always ready to like explain something to Zach, but at that moment I was just speechless. Like, I didn't know what to say, because it also kind of like hit me hard as well that, you know, I have a 6-week-old son who hasn't even seen his grandpa yet, and because of COVID we don't know when we'll be able to go visit again. And on top of that, like, we tried to, something as simple as pictures, we tried to send pictures last week, 2 weeks ago, and they sent it back. Like, I came to my mom's house and I found the envelope sitting here, and my dad has been asking about the pictures every day, and it's ridiculous that he can't even see pictures right now, you know? And
I think also what's tough right now for him to even comprehend is the 65 years. And the other day we have to have the talk where he asked me, and I told Sada I didn't know how to answer him. He said, what's going to happen 65 years if, you know, Sido...
To be fair, I don't think any of us can comprehend the 65 years. I don't think any person with
I can't, but, you know, he did ask about if something were to happen to him,
right.
You know, which is like in the back of your head, that's like the phone call that you're scared to, you know, like, we have to be realistic. 65 years, I mean, that's not, yeah.
Well, I just want to allow Sada to give some final words since she has to hop off. I want to let everyone know that we're not discriminating against our only male here, one of the sons. He had to jump off about 10 minutes ago, I think, to go back into work. So we're grateful to Mohamad that he was able to join briefly, but he's, I think, watching on Facebook, so hi. And we'll turn it over to you, Sada, to, I guess my question for you before you leave is, how do you want the story of the HLF5 to be remembered? What lessons can you kind of, do you hope that the Muslim community in the US and just the greater American society at large in the world can take from this case, and any final thoughts that you have?
I mean, as a teacher, I always look at things from a historical perspective. So just always knowing that, us Muslims, we were, taken as a minority group, discriminated against because of the actions of, few. And we were targeted, we were discriminated against, we dealt with injustice. And knowing that so many other minorities dealt with this and still continue to deal with this, I think my major message is, that famous quote of, first they came for the Jews and I didn't care because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the other people, and it's a longer quote, but the point is, our plight should be the plight of everyone, because if we are being dealt with injustice, with injustice and not equal apply the law, then what is that going to stop from anybody else is happening to? Our country was founded on the greatest principles in the world, principles of democracy and justice and human rights and freedom. And I think if our founding fathers were to come and see all of the things that's happening now, they would be appalled at, the different laws that are being broken, and prejudice and racism. So I think it's important that we're not just looked at just as one case. This is part of a much bigger story of the United States, where people are consistently, minorities are being treated unfairly, unfair, application of the law. And even when I go into prison, and I tell people this all the time, you can see the racism in the prison itself. I can see who's there and I can see who's not. So it's because we love America that it needs to change. Like, this cannot continue to be a pattern. We can't lock up all the Japanese in Japanese internment camps, and then we can't keep, doing all the, racism and, slavery and everything with African Americans. It's just a continuous, vicious cycle that I think that at one point people need to stop and ask, like, when are we going to stop this? When is it going to get to the point where we have to stand up for what's right, and putting people behind bars for giving charity to people is absolutely unacceptable. So I think that's my major takeaway.
Thank you so much. I want to be sure to give Kathy and Steve a couple of minutes to talk about our efforts in support of the HLF5 and how people can get involved, and then turn it over to Q&A so you can answer some questions from the audience. At this point, if you haven't already typed your questions, please do, and we'll be sure that the HLF daughters can respond to you. Right now, I want to turn it over to Kathy Manley. She's our legal director, and she's been filing compassionate release motions on behalf of 30 political prisoners who are vulnerable to COVID-19, and among them are the HLF5. So please welcome Kathy. Yeah.
Thank you, Leena. It's good to be here. It's been really moving hearing all of you talk about how this has affected you and your children especially. It's just been really intense. And thank you for doing this. One of the things the Bureau of Prison has been absolutely terrible, as it is with everything else, has been terrible at dealing with COVID. As was mentioned earlier, all the prisons pretty much where your fathers are have some cases, some more than others. And I worry about that because they are vulnerable to it. We in CCF, we did identify 30 people that were vulnerable to COVID because of their age or underlying medical conditions. And we started looking at trying to file compassionate release motions for them. And the Bureau of Prisons is not going to let anybody out of these cases. Well, they even have regulations saying that anybody with a material support conviction can't get home confinement. So it's just not going to happen. Bureau of Prisons isn't going to do it. But it's possible that the judge could, that judges can. And judges have been in some of these cases, some of, general cases, not necessarily these kinds of cases. So it's definitely worth a try. It's because of the First Step Act. When the First Step Act passed in late 2018, it allowed for people to file compassionate release motions directly to the sentencing judge, or whatever judge was handling the case at that point, if it wasn't the original sentencing judge. And that's gotten a lot more people out even before COVID than was going on with BOP, because BOP just never wants to let people out for whatever reason. And they lie about the cases, and they lie about a lot of stuff, and they play a lot of games. And then so we identified, so all 5 of these cases were on our list of 30 people that were vulnerable to COVID. And so we started writing letters to them and looking into it. And so at this point, 1 motion's been filed, and I've been working with their attorneys, because in a lot of the cases that we deal with, the trial attorneys are not still involved and they don't want to do anything. But in this case, I've been dealing with Josh Draytel and Nancy Hollander and Linda Moreno, who are the trial attorneys for 3 of the cases, and they've been good. They've been good, and they've been wanting to help and do this. So I gave drafts of motions to them, and so far Josh Draytel just filed for Mohammad El-Mezain, and then the other 2. There's going to be 1 filed for Shukri Abubakar and Ghassan Elashi in the coming, I don't know, they're kind of waiting to see how the judge reacts to the first one first, because that'll give us some good information and to react to what the judge says about that case as far as filing the other ones, but they will be happening. And we just got to hope that the judge sees the injustice and does the right thing for once. It's not the same judge, but it's a judge that was involved with part of the case before, a different part of the case. We gotta just hope, because something's gotta change. It's just not right.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Did you have anything else to add to that, or?
Not that I can think of right now. I'm just kind of was emotionally moved by
I know, they're amazing. It was so Steve, I wanted to turn it over to you because of we all know that this is a political case. I mean, by the government's own admission, these men didn't even commit an actual crime. You know, they acknowledged that all the money that they sent over went to charitable activities, to humanitarian aid. And so we know that this needs a political solution outside of any sort of, you know, potential for compassionate release. Can you tell us about the Ego Relief Act, your efforts on behalf of the HLF? And then, since I didn't do it in the beginning, just give people the quick rundown of the case and, you know, how you're responding to it. Oh, hang on, Steve. Hang on, you're muted, Steve. Let me unmute you. Hang on. Okay. Oh, okay. 1 second. I think you have to unmute yourself, Steve.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. Phew. Okay.
All right. Like Kathy, I found this discussion to be very emotional and beautifully presented. I love the way you talked. My father died in World War II when I was 2 years old, so I grew up without a father at all. And hearing you talk so lovingly about your father makes me kind of feel touched inside. So anyway, thank you for doing that. What Kathy and I kind of concluded was that there probably is not going to be a solution to this other than by going to Congress and saying we've got to deal with the underlying problem here. And the way that it's actually a relatively simple solution, and it's a relatively simple case for dealing with that. The Holy Land Foundation had a very, after 9/11, recognized that they were going to run into trouble with the material support for terrorism laws. They got advice. The advice was don't give any money to any organization on the designated terrorist list. They followed that completely. They got advice to give their donations through a zakat committees, local zakat committees, which were the same committees that USAID and other major charities used to avoid any implication that they were giving money to charity. US government concedes that that happened. No money went to any terrorist organization. It all went through the zakat committees. The US government came up, and the FBI came up with this crazy rationale by saying that the Zakat committees in some way were controlled by, maybe some of them were controlled by a designated terrorist organization, Hamas. And they brought in a lot of crazy evidence and anonymous experts to testify to that. It was a gross misrepresentation of how the trial should have gone. It just didn't it violated basic laws. But in any event, they concluded from that because of the way the funds were donated to the Zakat committees, it could have raised the prestige of Hamas, and raising the prestige of Hamas would have been support for a designated terrorist organization. Having gone through that, you can just see how completely flimsy and embarrassing even this case is. This is not a case should have ever been brought. The question is how to undo it. And the reason that they could do this was because the material support for terrorism laws were drawn up in a way that did not require intent to support terrorism. All that they had needed was, once they knew that a donation had been made, to find some unforeseen, inconsequential way that this might have benefited some terrorist organization at some place at some time, and that would be sufficient then to violate the material support laws. So as Kathy drew up the law, and I said I was going to get it passed in 5 years, we drew up a bill called the Ego Relief Act, Entrapment and Governmental Overreach Relief Act. And we wanted that this so-called Ego Relief Act bill to deal with the three major ways in which the FBI is able to bring about these phony prosecutions. And focusing on one part, they are able to do this through the material support for terrorism laws that don't require intent. All they have to do is figure out some crazy way that there might have been an unforeseen consequence to what the act was. So our part of the Ego bill would be to say no one can be convicted under these sections without proof that they intended to support violence and terrorism. And the key to it is, in a way, that these laws would be retroactive. By being retroactive, it would allow lawyers to bring these cases back into court and say, now we have to re-examine the old cases under the new law, which says that there has to be proof of intent. And we believe very strongly that they would never be able to prove intent in this case, and so that would require that the case be thrown out. We're also going to do that with the entrapment cases. There has never been a codified law for entrapment, and it has shifted back and forth as the courts have made it more and more liberal, more and more less utilitarian, to the point where right now it's virtually unusable. So part of the Ego bill would be to create an entrapment offense, codify it, that says that you cannot begin an entrapment unless there is a proof that the target has taken substantial steps toward criminal activity. And then finally, we have a thing, the final part of the bill is that you cannot give classified evidence to a trial judge unless, jeez, I got a phone ringing in the back here. Can't give classified information to a trial judge without sharing it with security cleared defense counsel. So those are the three aspects of the Ego bill, and we're trying to get that passed right now. So what I would like everybody to do is listening to this would be to go out and personally contact your representative, write them a letter, call the office, do something to talk about and say, we want you to get involved with passing the Ego Relief Act, the Entrapment and Governmental Overreach Relief Act. If we can get a buzz in Congress about it, I think that there is a very good opportunity here for us to get something passed, because it seems to appeal both to Republicans and Democrats. The Republicans get it, the Democrats get it. They get it from different points of view. They have different points of view on it. But it is something that I have gotten a good response from Congress. I think we could move it. but we just need to create a buzz for it. So everybody listening to this, please call your representative personally or write a letter or do something to push the bill.
Thank you so much, Steve. Yeah, and for more information about the Ego Relief Act, you can send us an email, info@civilfreedoms.org, and we'll send you a copy of it. It's also on our website, civilfreedoms.org, but we can give you all the materials to push for this bill. I want to move on quickly because we have 20 minutes left to bring in the daughters one more time. I'm going to read a question. What can we do to help support the cause, legal or otherwise? And this is a question that we received on Facebook by Ahmed Qatanani. I think as Steve said, did you want to quickly, Steve, talk about any sort of, is there any other legal recourse, or have they, you know?
As far as I know, that they have exhausted all the other possible forms of relief through the courts, and the courts have been uniformly horrible. Unsympathetic, uncompassionate. We just have got a brick wall there. So I think this is the only way going forward. If somebody can come up with a better idea, I'd love to hear it, but I haven't heard a better one than to go to Congress and try to get the law changed. And it's a simple change for this case. And I have to say, when we crafted it, when Kathy and I were looking at it, we always sort of said we have to keep the Holy Land case in mind, because this is one of the great cases of injustice ever. And if we cannot get this reversed, it really says something very sad about the way our government works.
Thank you. I think, I don't think we've gotten many questions, a lot of very nice greetings to the daughters. I want to read a question we received over Zoom from Hamja Ahsan. He said, what can we do in the UK? The Palestine solidarity movement here is huge, yet very few have heard of the HLF5. Victoria Brayton is an exception. How can we show transatlantic solidarity? Any one of you guys can jump in.
I would take this webinar and show it in the UK. Can we?
Right.
Can we send it to them?
We have a new question also. Has the Ego Relief Act been presented to Congress, to this current Congress?
Yes, I spent a whole week down there going to some 58 offices and talking about it. During the family conference, we've had family members go up and lobby Congress on several occasions about it. When I went myself lobbying last year.
6 times at least, spending several days there, Steve. Visiting several
offices. Well, an entire week. It was 58
right.
congressional offices. But I was surprised how many people remembered the family members that had come and spoke about them and sort of said, yeah, what happened to them was unjust. So they understand it. The question is whether they can get something through Congress, whether they can get it through the Senate. But certainly people are willing to listen. I did not get a sense that they were not willing to listen.
I should note that it hasn't been officially introduced yet. It doesn't have any sponsors yet, if that might have been the question.
We have a comment here from Tasnim Kadura. She said, just wanted to comment about the impact the HLF have years later. Recently, we went through my father's old papers and found documents about his orphan sponsorship through HLF. They were so beautiful, including letters, report cards, pictures, etc. The impact they had was so real and pure. After seeing those documents, my father decided that he and each individual member of my family should revive that deed once again. May Allah reward them for every life they've touched, and may He consider every act done in their memory a sadaqah jariyah for them. Thank you so much for that comment. I guess for these last 15 minutes, you know, I'd like everyone, you know, to pull back 3 of the daughters that we still have here to give, you know, some final thoughts about their father's cases and what they want to see from the community as far as action and involvement, and keeping the story of the HLF5 alive in everyone's imaginations, and a part of the humiliation and, you know, the way just the design of the prison system in the US, you know, by putting it so remote, is to erase prisoners from the imagination of the greater American public. And I think with more awareness around mass incarceration, I think people are understanding this now, and it's come to the forefront. And so I don't know, I mean, whatever thoughts you guys have that you want to share with everybody. We'll start with you, Tasnim.
Inshallah. First off, thank you all so much for having us on and allowing us the opportunity to talk about how real this is, not just on paper, but actually see faces and hear our stories. We live in a world that's not perfect, and I wouldn't say that like everybody in government is blinded or not a good person. There are good people that are working in government, but there are other people who need that pressure because this is not fair. And this is, you know, we're all families who, just like everyone else, has sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever it may be. We all have our American dream that we want to continue to live in, being American citizens. And so my first advice is like to just educate other people, be more informed about what's going on with the HLF-5 and educate people, have conversations, not just about the HLF-5, but all the injustices that are happening. It could get overwhelming, but it shouldn't shy us away from actually standing up for what's right, especially going on with our minority Black community, even our, you know, what's happening, even not just in the US, but outside the US, what we're hearing about what happened like in Afghanistan. Stand up for justice when you see something that somebody's doing wrong. It doesn't matter, and we know this in Islam, like it doesn't matter how hard it is for you to struggle, stand up against what is wrong, because that is our duty as human beings in this world. It doesn't take away from the fact of what religion you believe in, what gender you are, what how you look, how tall you are, how much you know. We can all learn from one another and have these active conversations. My second ask for everybody is to pray not just for the HLF-5, but I'm pretty sure that there are other people in prison right now who should not be in prison, especially from the minority community. And then the third one is even write letters to the HLF-5. We have an Instagram called Free the HLF. And so you can look us up, and we have their addresses there. Write plain letters, English only. You can send that from outside the US. Send them letters letting them know that, you know, you're thinking about them, that you're supporting them. Just staying alive and making sure this stays alive, because like mentioned, when there's a buzz, more people are paying attention, and you never know. One person, you may think one person may not make a difference, but if you think about like a candle, one candle could light 1,000 candles. And I think each and every one of you are able and capable of doing that. So thank you all so much for hearing us out and listening to our narrative. It doesn't stop here, and we love our dads, and we're so proud of them, and we'll continue to live their legacy of helping other people regardless of what anyone else says or does. They are innocent, and they are our everything, our rock. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tasnim. Asma, did you want to also jump in and give your final thoughts? And
yeah, she basically had all the thoughts that I was saying, the writing letters and really supporting and trying to communicate, showing them that they're not, you know, alone in this time, and then also just spreading awareness. So a lot of things right now, if you think about it, like a lot of the movements that are happening because of the new movement of social media. Like at the time where they got convicted and everything, it wasn't that active, and so everything right now that's happening, even with the previous case of Ahmed, the one that got actually exposed because of videos, you know, people posting videos and all that stuff, it's just so impactful. So if we can do something where we're just spreading awareness and talking about the case, and doing it through social media and other, you know, forms of that will be I think the most helpful thing.
thank you so much.
Could I just jump in here quickly and answer a question I saw? One of the questions was, what is the number of the bill? And I just want to explain that it has not yet been introduced yet. It doesn't have a number. And that's one of the first things we have to do, is to find a sponsor for the bill. And hopefully we'll do that once we can get back into Congress. But now, of course, it's kind of closed. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
We have another question. Is there anything we can do to push for compassionate release? maybe by contacting the judge and pushing them to grant the motion.
Yeah, let's see. Am I muted?
No, you're fine. I can hear you. Yeah.
I would say people could send letters to me in support of it, and I could get them to the attorneys that when they file the cases. So like Josh already filed that one, so I could give them letters for Mohammad El-Mezain, and then for the others, if you'd send letters to me in support of compassionate release for them, it would be addressed to the judge. But yeah, then I could forward those to the attorneys and they could file them, or they could send them directly to the attorneys for the, that are filing them, which if you know. We can talk about that maybe more offline, but people can definitely do letters in support of it.
If you want to write a letter, you can email it to Kathy Manley, Kathy, Kathy, at civilfreedoms.org, or message us on Facebook if you want information on how to support the compassionate release motions. Zaira, if you wanted to talk about, your final thoughts and, any sort of takeaways for the community and our viewers.
Yeah, of course. Again, it's going to be kind of repeating what these lovely ladies said. I want to thank you guys for giving us this platform to spread this awareness about our fathers. And I just wanted to maybe take the time to remind everyone that this isn't a Palestinian issue or a Muslim issue or anything. This is a humanitarian issue, because these men did, they dedicated their lives to helping the needy all over the world. And I think with everything and with everything that's going on in the country right now, in our nation, there's so much going on with minorities, and this is the time for us to unite as a human race to fight for what's right. Because at the end of the day, this truly could have happened to anyone, and we see it. We go to the prisons and we see who's there, and it is minorities, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, just remembering that these men are innocent men who haven't even committed one crime. There was not even one single proof of any crime at all. The only thing they did was feed hungry children all around the world. Again, this is not just about being Palestinian or Arab or Muslim. This is about being actually a minority, post 9/11 hysteria. This is all due to that. And there's also a lot going on with prison reform right now in the nation. And I just feel like sometimes maybe the HLF5 have been forgotten. They are part of this prison reform. They are actually political prisoners in the United States of America. At the end of the day, I'm always going to love this. This is my country, but I do feel like my country has failed me, right? So just to remember that these men are facing 65 years in prison, and we don't know what's going to happen, and we've done everything legally, and that's failed us as well. So like the girls have mentioned, to send them letters, and honestly, just like this, Leena, I mean, everything you guys have done for us and giving us this platform to speak. If anyone else wants us, we are more than happy to come speak about these men and our fathers. And these men were actually huge parts of their communities, and they did so much for their communities, and they gave back. And this isn't even anything about like financial help. We just want awareness. And at the end of the day, with social media and how amazing it's making things happen for people all around the world, we're connected. So let's use it and help each other, because again, there's so much going on in our country right now that this is our time. This is our time to shine as a human race, as minorities, whatever you want to call it. This is our time. And I just wish more people would take the time like you guys have to speak about the HLF5. There's so much going on. There's so many cases that we're seeing, these innocent Black men being killed for no reason. And then at the end of the day, these 5 men are also innocent, and they are in prison for no reason. So how amazing would it be if we all united together and fought for all these cases together? I think a lot more would happen. And I think people need to just kind of join forces. And again, thank you so much for everything you guys have done. And for everyone that's watching, I actually want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our stories and, keep us in your prayers. And we're just so thankful for you guys. And I'm also really proud of you ladies, because I watched you guys grow, and you did not let our dad's situation stop you. And just thank you.
Can I ask you one thing just before we end? How have your fathers been able to keep their faith so strong? It's the last 10 days of Ramadan, and I just want to end on a little bit of a spiritual reflection, just, 30 seconds from each of you, if you don't mind. And you can start, Zaira, since you're the only one not muted, so I think.
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. With this whole COVID thing that's happened, it's fun. It's not, of course. It's really sad to see everything that the whole world is going through. It's actually a worldwide issue. It's not even a nationwide issue. So it doesn't matter where you came from, rich or poor. Everyone is stuck. And I've heard so many people say this is like prison. This is like prison. But at the end of the day, you're able to actually move from your couch to your sofa, go outside. But when you're in prison, you're actually stuck in these four walls. And I ask myself that question every day, Leena, how are they? These men, these ammos, my dad, they are the ones that keep us going. They really do. And I really do think it's that faith that they have and the strength and the hope that they have in Allah and God to give them that strength, whether it means they're going to spend the rest of their lives in prison. My dad always tells me that I am prepared. And he's like, I will never change anything I did. If I were to go back, I would do it all over again. And knowing that is, I think, what keeps us as daughters and the families strong. And as a community, I mean, they're busy helping people get GEDs. A lot of people have, converted to Islam. My dad's actually making masabih out of bread. I mean, they're creative. They've all I know even learned more. They're drawing. They're using their time wisely. And if anything, COVID-19, they've been living it for 12 years, and they are the prime example of how we can deal with COVID-19. We're lucky, we get to go out, we see each other, but they don't. And my dad, I'll just end it with this. My dad has been telling me that, COVID-19 is literally the chance. It's humility for humanity. It's time for humanity just to take a break. It's humility for humanity. And I just love when he said that to me. And I said, that's so on point, because you guys have been living this lockdown for 12 years now. And I ask myself that every day. And how are you so strong? How are you so strong? And we're blessed to have them as our fathers.
How about you?
Let me just drop in. We're almost out of time, and I want to be sure and tell people who are not connected to us on our mailing list to send us an email, and at the info@civilfreedoms.org. Right? Is that it?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mel.
Yeah, because we stay connected, we will be doing things. You'll find out about it. And I also want to thank all the panelists. It was really wonderful that you could all join us. You were all very well spoken. Thank you.
Yes.
No,
and before I end with Asma and Tasnim, I again want to announce next week's webinar at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have Miko Peled, my father, Sami Al-Arian, moderated by Nora Barros-Friedman, and it's about Israel's interference in the U.S. criminal justice system and looking more closely at cases like the HLF-5, like my father's case, and the many cases in which, your political activism is targeted, especially if you're Palestinian in the United States. Asma, quickly tell us how your father's been able to keep his faith strong during.
Yeah, like Zaira was saying, he's mentally free, physically locked, but mentally free. He has managed to memorize the whole Quran in the 12 years. It took him 12 years, but he finally did it. I think a few months ago, he had just completed memorizing the Quran, which is just amazing. And so he actually also is keeping busy. He's pretty much informed on everything that you can think of. He's subscribed to so many different magazines. He reads every day. So he's telling me things that even I don't know about. And so he keeps himself busy working out and mentally and physically and spiritually. And so again, I feel my heart is at ease knowing that every time I speak to him and he speaks to me, he assures us that he is keeping himself busy and gaining, ajr in this life and the next through all of his spiritual acts, in prison. So,
Tasnim, can you share a little bit about how your father's been able to keep his faith strong?
Yeah, similarly to these ladies, it's literally having that faith knowing, I know he constantly reminds us of our purpose in this life and how small and little time we have in this life, and just making sure that we occupy that time with things that are pleasing to God, and serving him and serving our community in the best way possible. And he's always reminding us that there are prophets that we know have gone through a lot of trials. It doesn't mean that we're bad people. They're actually good people, but it's a chance to get closer to God. And we know that Prophet Joseph went to jail unjustly. And so it's just learning from previous mentors and prophets, and knowing that God's not going to leave us alone. And if that means that we have to go through tests like this to continue to fight for the right of other people, then we're going to continue to do that. And I think it's beautiful that he always shares that. And I know the HLF5, whenever we're emailing back and forth, they're always reminding us of God and God's power, and at the end of the day, what our purpose in this life is.
Thank you all so much. You're amazing and brilliant and so strong. And I'm so grateful for you all to be here with us today. I highly encourage and urge everyone watching to please invite these women out into your communities, and men, young men. We have Mohamad, we have many other sons who are not represented, other daughters too. So please reach out, and always keep the HLF5 in your consciousness, in your prayers, in your activism, in any pursuit of justice and human rights. They are our modern political prisoners, and we can't ever forget them. My heart is just full. I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm dead inside, but hearing you guys, I mean, it's just, it's amazing. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, and I think we're all still kind of dealing with our own traumas, even years after the cases. Hearing your experiences is very similar to ones that I went through myself. So thank you all for being here today, speaking with us. And I guess we'll end right here. One more announcement. On Monday, Cage is holding their annual Ramadan fundraiser. It's a webinar. There's a flyer for it on our Facebook page. My father will be their guest. I will be introducing him for the first couple of minutes, and he'll be talking about his 62-day hunger strike during his case, and just kind of lessons from his case, telling his story. Hearing these young women talking about their fathers being such strong men of faith reminds me of my own. So I thought I would plug that in there for people to participate and view that. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you all amazing women. Thank you to Mel, Steve, and Kathy. Subscribe to our news digest, and we hope to see you back next week. Thank you all.